anyways, it's really good to see everyone, all these wonderful, righteous people here to learn some Torah concepts. Let's get the idolatry out on the table, right? But no, again, we're going to continue in the Rambam's Mishneh Torah. The book, it's the tractate concerning idolatrous modes and behaviors. We're in chapter 7, and we're going to pick up with halakha number 6. And it says that we are allowed to benefit from images which Gentiles made for aesthetic purposes, which, again, with Gentiles, we're talking about non-Jews in general. But there are instances here where Gentiles, where it says Gentile, it means either an idolatrous non-Jew or a righteous non-Jew, which is called, a righteous non-Jew is called a ben Noach, of course. But here it's specifically saying we are allowed to benefit from images which idolatrous non-Jews made for aesthetic purposes. It is forbidden, however, to benefit from images that are made for the purpose of idol worship. What is implied? It is forbidden to benefit from any images found in villages, for one may assume that they were made for the sake of idol worship. When images are found in a city, they are forbidden only when they are found at the entrance to the city and hold a staff, a bird, globe, sword, crown, or ring in their hands, because it's assumed that those accoutrements have to do with idolatry. Otherwise, we may assume that they were made for aesthetic purposes, and benefit from them is permitted. Okay. So, when it says allowed to benefit, it literally means enjoy the artistic talent and or sell or use as scrap metal. So in other words, like to enjoy artistry that's not specifically idolatrous, like paintings and what that are made by even idolatrous non-Jews, is permitted. It's permitted to trade that art, to buy and sell it. Like if you're an art broker, for example, and you have, God forbid, that there would be anybody that's idolatrous, but an idolatrous non-Jew is the painter and you're selling it for them for a commission or what have you, it's not a problem. As long as it's not used for idolatrous purposes. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah, so the idea here is that to view a sculpture that's made by an idolatrous non-Jew, again, as long as it's not an idolatrous sculpture, it's not a problem to enjoy the beauty of it or what have you. Okay, so we are allowed to benefit from images. The Torah states that these laws apply only to human images. Other authorities, and indeed certain interpretations of the Torah, disagree and consider the statements as referring to all images. From the Rambam's commentary on the Mishneh, Avodah Zarah 3:1, it appears that the latter opinion reflects his view. So his view has to do with all images, not just human images. Okay. So, and then it talks a little note here about images which Gentiles or idolatrous non-Jews made for aesthetic purposes. Note chapter 3, halakha 10, with regard to the prohibition against Jews making human images even for these purposes. See our commentary on that halakha with regard to the place of art in Jewish life. It is forbidden, however, to benefit from images that are made from the purpose of idol worship, even if they are artistic masterpieces. Thus, the entire realm of Gentile sacramental art is forbidden to us. So that brings up an answer to a good question, such as you go down to the art museum. Oftentimes in American history and European history, you'll see these iconic paintings and formations and reliefs of certain types of idolatrous religious practices and so on and so forth, people that are venerated and so on. Here it's explaining that even though that does take a certain amount of artistic talent, it is not allowed to be viewed to derive benefit from it. So we don't want to go. We don't want to go and.
So you can't take pleasure from it.
You don't want to take pleasure from that, and you don't want to support it financially.
So does that mean that if you're at, say, the league, that you can't go in there because there's plenty of...
I think that would be more like you can't run a museum because this is taking benefit from. It's not that...
No, it also has to do with paying to view it and take and get aesthetic pleasure from it.
Is there idolatrous images in the Louvre? I don't know.
Oh,
I know there is, like in the Vatican, if you go pay into the
right, right. But, you know, even there's still paintings that have...
There's local museums in the city that that have that, but
You can't go in, you shouldn't go in, or that you shouldn't use those people who see it and just like that.
these are very good questions that are specific for the rabbi. So I can ask the rabbi to see what his, what the direct halakhic view is on that concerning. Should we not even go in the building? Because usually to go to the museum you have to pay.
Right, that's what I'm asking. Because,
Right.
And then sometimes you don't know what's in there, so you don't...
Right, which and
I'm sorry to...
no, this is what we're doing.
I think attention would be the issue.
Attention would probably be the issue if I were to guess. And again, this is a guess. I'm not sure about the ruling here. But my guess would be that he would say that if we, well, not him, my guess would be that more than likely if we wanted to go to the museum and we avoid those things, we're not there to support the procurement of idolatrous objects. We're only there to enjoy the art that is permitted to be viewed. So, again, that's only my small, humble opinion. I will talk to the rabbi and get us a better answer. So, okay. Oh. Okay, so we talked about the staff, the bird, the things that would be in the hands or what have you, or alongside of an image at the gates of a city. So what's the big deal here with why does it say we should assume that imagery made in a village is idolatrous versus a big city? Typically, because the city. The city has more artisans and people that do artistic works for a living, where people in villages, small villages, they usually do things to run the village. And if they're making imagery of any sort, it usually has to do with some type of venerated idolatrous format, typically. Did you have something? Right, so he was basically saying a similar idea that people in the city are generally going to procure imagery, for aesthetic pleasure from a master craftsman, versus in the village, people are going to make imagery for themselves, which to take the time away from their daily duties and to make imagery that usually has a negative connotation. Okay, number 7, statues of false deities, which are found discarded in the marketplace or in scrap metal heap, are permitted. Needless to say, this applies to pieces of statues. In contrast, should one find a hand, a foot, or another limb from the form of one of the constellations or celestial signs, it is forbidden to benefit from it. Since one knows that this limb is one of the images that is worshipped, the prohibition against benefiting from it remains until one knows that the Gentiles who worshipped it nullified it. In other words, they destroyed it and made it not fit for use for their idolatrous services. Then this can seem a little contrasting to some of the laws that we read in the last class that discuss purchasing, that is forbidden for a Jewish person to purchase a heap of scrap metal that he found an idol in it. So just say he goes to an idolatrous non-Jew to buy some scrap metal. There's a pile of scrap metal here, and he takes ownership of it from that person by paying or whatever, and now it's his. Then, of course, he's unaware, but then he finds out that there's an idol in the scrap heap. He's not allowed to own that scrap heap now because that idol was part of the scrap heap. So because it's forbidden for a Jewish person to purchase an idol from an idolatrous non-Jew, or from any non-Jew, specifically to purchase an idol. So it told us that in that case, if he didn't take full possession of it or pay for it yet, then he's not to pay for it. If he did pay for it, he should work it out with the person to break the deal, so he doesn't take true possession of the idol.
Can you take the idol out and then purchase the rest of it?
Well, that's I'm sure what he has to do first is break any ties of any ownership to the idol that's in the scrap pile, and then I'm sure if the idol is removed or whatever and is done away with, then the scrap pile becomes permitted for benefit or purchasing, if you would.
If there is an idol or pieces of an idol in the scrap heap, wouldn't that indicate that the previous owner might have said, "I'm done with this, nothing but junk"?
Right. Well, if it's like it here, it's the pieces it's talking about that's it's destroyed and it's no longer viewed as an idol, then it's permitted. By the, you know, if the, in other words, the people who worshipped it, if they nullified it and it's now scrap and it's not an idol anymore at all, it's permitted. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I know this stuff is a little far out for us. I don't remember the last time I bought a scrap pile with idol pieces.
Right,
but
interesting.
Since I quit talking to Santa, it's just I haven't seen a lot of scrap piles with idols in them.
What's interesting is that I was watching the show and how during the World War II, how the Nazis took a lot of art from a lot of Jewish families.
Yeah.
Apparently, a lot of Jewish families had a lot of art.
Yes.
So a lot of it was confiscated by the Nazis. With a lot of stuff.
Yeah, there were some very wealthy Jewish families in Europe during that time that had vast art collections that were priceless, that were, like you said, confiscated by the Nazi regime. The Nazis were known also for for stealing art from places, and if it went against their ideology, they would destroy it, no matter what the value of it.
And they actually did a whole exhibition of degenerated art and articles for the Bangkok.
Wow.
They were like putting it down and displaying it. And it was thousands of people that showed up to see it. So,
yeah, so if anybody has any questions concerning paintings or, you know, art or imagery for aesthetic purposes, it is permitted to own these things and to derive benefit from them, as long as it's not idolatrous imagery. And it gets a little tricky. How do we know if something's idolatrous imagery? It typically has to do with a known form of idolatrous worship that has a process to go about doing it. So, for example, the icons that we would see in the museum today that we know that they are religious relics, it's obvious what they're used for. So even though they are considered priceless or very expensive works of art, at the end of the day, they're idolatrous imagery.
I asked a question
Yes.
regarding portraits, like family portraits that you would perform that of your grandparents.
Portraits of your family members is not an issue at all to derive benefit from or to own for aesthetic purposes, or even for sentimental value, of course. So most people would have family portraiture for sentimental value. Even to have a family Bible that's an heirloom that's passed down. A lot of family Bibles would have the family records of weddings and funerals and births and family tree. And maybe it has just a sentimental value because it's a family heirloom. That is permitted.
I could totally see. I mean, some people might think like not that thing about the scrap pile with an idol, but I could totally see that. When people go to things like for auction, they buy a lot of stuff. You could easily find idolatrous items in there.
Yes. Yes, what she was saying is that with the scrap piles, you go to auctions and things like that. Sometimes there's lots of items that could be mixed into a pile of goods that you're looking to purchase for a discounted price, and there may be these things in there that you're not aware of. So this does help to know what do you do in that circumstance. If you see it's in there, then you shouldn't purchase it. But, you could probably work something out with the owner of the pile and ask him to remove certain things, and then whatever's left that is permitted would be permitted. And here in a minute, we're going to get into some of those things where it talks about what happens if you have these big piles of images, and one of them was used for idolatrous purposes, and you can't tell it apart from the others. So does it invalidate the whole lot of the images, So
what about like say we found out Santa Claus? What about Santa Claus? Would that be considered an idolatrous image? I don't think people really worship.
I wouldn't think so. So you're saying your Santa Claus doll collection is safe.
Thanks, Terry. Now we have to get rid of them. Sorry, Siri.
That's funny. Okay, this is fun. All right, Halakha 8 says the following laws apply when a person finds articles which have the form of the sun, the moon, or a dracon upon them. Let's see about this dracon idea. Of course, we know what the sun and the moon are. Anybody have any questions for clarity on that? The big orange ball of light in the sky during the day, and the moon-shaped one that's out at night. The sun and moon. I hope you guys like my jokes. They're kind of lame. So this idea of a dracon, articles that have the form of the sun, the moon, or a dracon on them. What is this dracon? So that's some say that this word is possibly where the idea of a dragon, the word dragon, comes from. But in his commentary on the Mishneh, the Rambam describes this image as a fish-like man with fins and many scales, probably referring to the Greek god Neptune. Then Rashi comments on Avodah Zarah 42b, and others interpret the form as that of an animal similar to a serpent. Perhaps this term is the source for the word dragon. Okay. And when it talks about here the images that upon them, it's referring to the question. The question is whether these forms should be considered to be representation of deities, and if it is, then it would be forbidden. Okay, so for example, some people would have this. You see this in people's outdoor decorations at times, an image of the sun. Like a metal.
A lot of Hispanic cultures.
Right. So the idea here is an image like that considered a deification of the sun, or is it simply an image of the sun for decorative purposes? So if there's any question, though, if there's a doubt, in Judaism concerning doubts, typically when there's a doubt, like if one had a doubt whether he or she said a blessing before they drank their drink, if there's a doubt, then we don't say the blessing. We don't repeat it for the sake of not saying a blessing in vain. Now, but if there's a doubt when it concerns idolatry, we always take the doubt to think that it is idolatrous, because there's no nullification of it through amount. So, like in other words, if there's only a small amount of idolatrous accoutrement to this thing, and it's what's a good example? If you have, let's see, if you have 1,000 statues that are for aesthetic purposes, and one of them is idolatrous, and it's mixed in, and you can't tell them apart, it makes the whole pile idolatrous. So that's like a doubt. I have a doubt. I'm not sure which one was used for idolatry. So that in that case of a doubt, it makes the whole thing idolatrous, basically, because there's no minimum amount of idolatry, in other words, that nullifies it. So if you have a doubt whether the image is idolatrous or not, it's go on the safe side, is what I'm trying to say. But most of the time in today's world, these images such as this are not idolatrous. And if you have a question, just put it to the side, and then we can ask the rabbi, "Rabbi, is this image idolatrous?" And he'll tell us. Okay. So so these articles which have the form of the sun or moon or dracon upon them, if they are golden or silver objects or silk garments, or if these forms were engraved on a nose ring or a finger ring, they are forbidden. If these forms are found on other articles, they are permitted, since we may assume that they were made for aesthetic purposes. Similarly, we may assume that any other form which is found on an article was intended for aesthetic purposes. Therefore, the articles are permitted. Number 9, a false deity, its accessories, and the objects offered to it are always forbidden, regardless of the proportion of the mixture they make up. What is implied? If an idol becomes mixed together with statues made for aesthetic purposes, I just said this, so we're going to say it again. If an idol becomes mixed together with statues made for aesthetic purposes, even if the proportion is merely 1 in several thousand, the entire group must be taken to the Dead Sea. So, yes.
Also, one of the things that would be an idol must be
Well, that's something that's separate. We'll have to look at that. I'm not prepared to answer that. So the question was that there's incense in the vicinity of an idolatrous figure. Does the incense become forbidden? Now, obviously, if the incense is being burned to the idol, that is forbidden. But as far as in the vicinity of, we'll have to look into that. So the entire group must be taken to the Dead Sea. This doesn't literally mean that you have to take a trip to the Dead Sea. The idea here is that something taken to the Dead Sea, it's presumed that once it goes into the Dead Sea, it can never be used again. So the sages teach us when it says this, that one can take the object and dispose of it in a way as if it's putting it into the Dead Sea, which is to make it completely unusable. Burn, destroy it, bury it. Throw it in the trash. Similarly, a goblet used for idol worship becomes mixed together with many other goblets, or a piece of meat coming from a sacrifice to a false deity becomes mixed with other meat, the entire group must be taken to the Dead Sea. Similarly, if a hide with a hole through which the heart was removed becomes mixed with other hides, it is forbidden to benefit from the entire mixture. It's talking about the hide here in ancient times or in cultures where animal sacrifices are made to false deities. They would cut a hole in a specific place to remove the heart, and that would render the hide unfit for use because of idolatrous connotation.
I would also assume the whole animal too.
Yes, absolutely. But again, here with the meat. So with the hide, it's said about the meat as well. So just imagine, God forbid, this poor animal, the hide and the meat now becomes unfit for use because it was dedicated to idols. So when a person transgresses and sells a false deity, one of its accessories or an object that was offered to it, it is forbidden to benefit from the money received, and that prohibition remains if these funds become mixed with others. Again, there's no minimum amount that nullifies it. It's still idolatrous, no matter what the ratio. So the ratio doesn't change the status of the idolatrous objects. So the money, the funds becomes mixed with others regardless of the proportion. It's forbidden. It's prohibited. There's a prohibition on it regardless of the proportion of the mixture they make up. Deuteronomy 7:26 states, "Lest you become condemned like it." From this we infer that anything that comes from a false deity, from any of its accessories, or from anything offered to it is governed by the same prohibition as it is. So I could say this about the incense. If we had incense that was directly offered to an idol and we mixed it in with other incense, now that incense is also idolatrous incense. Okay. So, number 10, when a false deity or an Asherah, are you guys familiar with Asherah? It's a type of tree that was used for idolatrous purposes in ancient times. So when a false deity or an Asherah is burned, it is forbidden to benefit from its ashes. So obviously it's forbidden to benefit from the deity itself or the tree that's being worshipped. But nonetheless, the ashes that's the result of the burning of it is also forbidden to benefit from. So a coal taken from an idol is forbidden. A flame from an idol is permitted, for it is not an entity with substance.
Does that mean that the area where the tree was burned shouldn't be used?
The area where the tree was burned. The question is, does that make the area where the tree was burned, or the idol, does it make it that area unfit for use? Yeah. That's a good question. I don't know. But we can find out. So a coal taken from an idol is forbidden. A flame from an idol is permitted, for it is not an entity with substance. When there is a doubt whether an object is connected to idol worship or not, it is forbidden. If, however, that doubt is questionable, it is permitted. What is implied? Should a goblet used for idol worship fall into a storage room of goblets? They are all forbidden because a false deity and all its accessories are always forbidden, regardless of the proportion of a mixture they make up. If one of the cups from this mixture falls together with two other cups, the entire second mixture is permitted. Does that make sense to everyone? So if you have a room, a basket full of cups and an idolatrous cup falls into it, all those cups are forbidden for use. but subsequently you have another basket of cups over here, and 2 cups from that forbidden basket falls into the other, though all of those are permitted. Because the idea here is that there's a definite doubt with the first one, because you know for a fact that there's an idolatrous cup, but there's somewhat of a doubt with the second one, because you're not sure. It's a double doubt. You're not sure at all which of the cups fell into the secondary basket of cups. So it's a double doubt, so then those cups are permitted. So should a ring used to adorn an idol become mixed together with 100 other rings, and then 2 of them fall into the Mediterranean Sea, it is permissible to use all of them. I don't know how that would happen, but so should a ring used to adorn an idol become mixed together? So this is a ring that would be on an idolatrous image. It's like an accoutrement of an idol or an accessory. If it became mixed together with 100 other rings, so it's a 100 to 1 ratio here of rings, and then 2 of them fall into the Mediterranean Sea, it is permissible to use all of them.
So a treasure finds jewelry and gold and all that stuff. If one of those, 2 of those, happen to have been on the idol, how would you know?
Right.
And it would not make that treasure something you couldn't benefit.
Right.
Seems
If 2 fell into the sea, so you didn't know if those 2 were the 2 idolaters.
right.
Right. So you have 101 rings. One of them is an accoutrement of an idol. 2 of them fall into to the sea, the Mediterranean Sea specifically. So that leaves what, 99 rings? So those 99 rings are they're okay.
Because there's a big possibility that one of those was the ring, so you don't
Yeah.
know.
And yep. Yes, sir.
What happens if like going back to the baskets with the goblets, if you know which goblet is the idolatrous one, are you allowed to take that out and just be okay?
Absolutely. If you can separate the idolatrous goblet for a fact from the other goblets, and you know that's the one it is, then you remove it and everything is fine. The problem here is not that the other goblets are infected by idolatry. The problem here is that you can't tell them apart. So you don't know, you know for a fact that one of them was used for idolatrous service. So because that one is forbidden and you can't tell which one it was anymore, it makes them all forbidden, because you know without a doubt that that item was used for idolatry. Huh? You're welcome. My pleasure. So should a forbidden ring become mixed together with 100 others, and then the group becomes divided, 40 being separated in one group and 60 in another, and then the entire group of 40 fall into another group of rings, it is permissible to use all of them. We presume that the forbidden ring remained among the majority. If the group of 60 falls into another group of rings, they are all forbidden. So you have 100, and one of them is pasul, it's bad, not fit for use. You separate to a majority of 60, a minority of 40. The 40 minority falls in with other rings. Those rings are permitted for use. The other 60 are not permitted for use because it's assumed that the ring is in the majority. The pasul ring is in the majority. Even if you mix it with 1,000 other rings, that 1,060 rings are still forbidden. Yes, sir.
I was just thinking about the story when Joseph was in Egypt. He put his goblet in one of the grain sacks of his brothers, and he said the goblet was used for divination. Under that scenario, would that grain then not be permitted to eat?
Wow.
Something to think about there. There really is.
There's got to be something there.
But at the same time, Yosef, if that was his personal goblet, he would never do.
Right.
It actually said it was. He never says that it was used for divination, but he says that a cup, a man like me would have a cup that was used for divination. He said it strangely.
It's like he didn't say it was a cup that he used for divination, but this is what these cups look like.
Yeah.
But at that time, they didn't even know
They
it was
didn't
Joseph.
know.
Right.
So they would have had to assume that it was.
That's
idolatry.
interesting thought, though.
So, well, that's a good question, but based on, I'm going to give some simple logic here. Doesn't mean it's the case. It's true. Being that the grain is the grain and the cup is the cup. If you separate the cup from the grain, I would assume that the grain is fine.
That makes sense.
But,
Because it wasn't a sack full of goblets that was.
Right.
You could distinguish between the two.
yes, and of course, if the goblet was used for unholy purposes, it's forbidden.
Yeah.
I'm going to assume that that's not going to be the case with Yosef.
Right.
Of course, but the idea that you're bringing up is very valid, though. Does the goblet in the sack of grain, if it is a forbidden goblet, does it make the grain forbidden? Again, logic would say if you separate the idolatrous accoutrement from the grain, then the grain would be permitted, unless the grain was used in league with the idolatrous goblet to perform idolatrous activity. Yes, sir.
I don't know if this goes for all grains, but a lot of grains absorb liquid. So if liquid would be mixed in with the grain.
If the cup had liquid in it.
If the cup was clean, but yeah, you never know. So it's probably safer to assume with grains that you probably not eat because it absorbs the wine or liquids used for idolatry purposes.
That's a good thought.
I know this because we use rice
Right. Okay, so let's see how many we have here. That is a good thought. Okay, we have quite a few left for this chapter, so we'll stop with the next one. So Halakha 11 says, sitting under the shade of the trunk of excuse me, a tongue twisted. Sitting under the shade of the trunk of an Asherah, whether it is worshipped itself or whether an idol was placed under it, is forbidden. It is, however, permissible to sit under the shade of its branches and its leaves. If a person has another route, it is forbidden for him to pass under it. If he has no other route, he may pass under it, provided he runs. So we don't need to hang out under Asherah trees. I don't know if that's still a custom in today's modern world at all, but it's definitely not something that we see here in the U.S. But nonetheless, you come upon an Asherah tree and you're thinking about hanging out under it, don't, just run. So, yes.
Is there a link between those trees and the Christmas tree of today?
What we'll do, we'll pause here with the Halakha, and then we'll pick that up in our class discussion.